Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Every time I come on air, it feels like I'm meeting close friends again, sitting down together to share an emotional story about life, about love, and about the challenges the characters must face. Today, we continue to follow the journey of the single mother, Lythieuca, a woman who has made us shed tears with her resilience, yet also warmed our hearts with the strength and love she devotes to her little family. In the previous episode, just when everything seemed perfect, the wedding was carefully prepared, and happiness filled the small home, a sudden twist struck. The dream wedding of Hoai and Hung had to be postponed, leaving behind not only regret but also worry about the uncertain days ahead. Smiles faded away, excitement dissolved, and countless concerns took their place. But that's how life is. The more storms we face, the more our faith and love are tested. In moments of hardship, we truly see the power of sharing, of genuine affection between people. And it is these very challenges that will determine whether the love between Hoai and Hung is truly strong enough to withstand the storms and open a new chapter of their journey together. So, what awaits them ahead? Can the simple happiness they long for return, perhaps even shine brighter after the storm? Let's find out together in today's episode. In the days leading up to the wedding, Hoai's small house was always bustling, glowing with an unusual brightness. Every morning, sunlight streamed through the bamboo trees at the front gate, casting its golden rays onto the red brick courtyard still damp with dew. Though heavily pregnant, Hoai cheerfully helped Hung sweep the yard and hang up the twinkling string lights from the previous year. Meanwhile, Hung busied himself repainting the old wooden door faded by time, working with a hopeful smile on his face. Inside, the faint scent of chrysanthemums and roses lingered, as Hoai had carefully arranged small vases of flowers, placing them on the table corners and windowsills. That simple space suddenly felt as warm and festive as a holiday. Tony's bright laughter echoed throughout the house, the little boy running around with a balloon in his hand, bought for him at the market by his father. By noon, the couple took time to test cook a few dishes they planned to serve on their big day. Hung crouched by the stove to light the fire, while Hoai carefully seasoned the food. The fragrant aroma of chicken soup and steaming sticky rice drifted all the way out to the porch. Mischievous Tony ran over, reaching out for a taste, making both of them burst into laughter. In that moment, happiness felt so close, as if they could reach out and touch it. But Hung wanted to care for Hoai even more. He took her to the nearby forest to gather medicinal herbs for a bath, refreshing and good for the baby. The forest path was quiet, leaves rustling overhead, with sunlight piercing through the thick canopy in scattered beams. Along the way, they caught some crabs and snails and picked bundles of fresh wild vegetables. Hoai's eyes sparkled with joy as she looked at their full basket of treasures. But the long, sloping walk left her tired. With her big belly, she had to sit down to rest. Hung bent over, worry in his voice as he clasped her hand. "Just rest, my love. Let me take care of the rest." Hoai only smiled softly, brushing off his concern, still wanting to share the work with him. That night, a sudden heavy rain poured down. The sound of rain pounded against the tiled roof, water flooding into the chicken coop and rabbit hutch. The animals cried out in panic, wings flapping, cages rattling. Alarmed, Hoai jumped up, but Hung blocked her. "Let me handle it. You're pregnant, you can't move around like that." Yet her anxiety overwhelmed her. She insisted on helping Hung cover and reinforce the cages. Under the blinding curtain of rain, the two of them hurriedly pulled tarps and tied bamboo poles, sealing the pens tight. Hung kept glancing at her, his heart torn between frustration and worry. But Hoai stubbornly stood by his side, unwilling to let him shoulder the burden alone. When the storm eased, the courtyard was soaked, and both of them were drenched to the bone. Hung looked at Hoai in silence, eyes filled with both love and reproach. Quickly, he led her inside, dried her off, and poured her a cup of hot ginger tea. Yet deep down, a vague unease gnawed at him. And indeed, after that rainy night, Hoai began to feel unwell. A dull pain gripped her belly, sweat breaking out across her forehead as her face turned pale with exhaustion. Hung's eyes widened in panic, his heart tightening with dread, as if sensing misfortune looming. The joy of preparing for their wedding day had barely begun to blossom, when a sudden storm of fate struck. After the torrential night rain, as dawn was just breaking and the damp earth released its raw scent, Hoai suddenly felt a sharp pain in her belly. The cramps came in waves, forcing her to clutch her stomach, her breath rapid, cold sweat soaking her face. Her lips turned pale, her gaze unfocused as if she might faint at any moment. Hung panicked, his heart tightening as though crushed. He rushed to lift Hoai into his arms, calling her name in a trembling voice while hastily telling Mother how to grab clothes and important documents. Little Tony, startled awake, burst into tears. His tiny hands clung desperately to his father's shirt, not understanding anything except that his mother was in pain. The car sped down the misty village road. On both sides, the rice fields were flooded from the night storm, puddles glistening in the early morning light. The blaring horn cut through the still dawn, overpowering the crowing of roosters. In the passenger seat, Hoai struggled to keep her eyes open, her trembling hand clutching Hung's tightly. He gripped the steering wheel hard, glancing at her again and again, whispering words of reassurance. "Hold on, love, just a little longer, we're almost at the hospital. I'm right here, don't be afraid." At the hospital, medical staff rushed Hoai onto a stretcher and wheeled her straight into the emergency room. The white doors closed behind her, leaving Hung and the family in the cold corridor. The harsh glow of the neon lights reflected on the spotless tiles, the sharp smell of antiseptic thick in the air, pressing down on everyone's nerves. Hung collapsed into a chair, his hands clasped tightly, sweat soaking his back. Every second dragged on like an eternity. Tony sat innocently in his grandmother's lap, wide eyes fixed on the closed doors. He asked in a small, confused voice. "Grandma, is Mommy sleeping? When will she wake up to play with me?" Mother Ha, choking back her tears, stroked his head gently. "Your mom is resting, sweetheart. She'll be out soon." Finally, the door swung open, and the doctor emerged, his face stern, his voice steady and firm. The patient must rest completely. No walking, no heavy work. Even the smallest strain could endanger the baby. The words stabbed into Hung's heart like a knife. He froze, his pulse racing, his whole body weak. Then he rushed into the ward, where Hoai lay fragile on the bed. Her face was pale, her lips cracked and dry, her thin hand resting protectively over her belly. Hung sat beside her, grasping her hand. His eyes reddened, his nose stung, his voice cracked with guilt. "I'm sorry. I should have kept you inside, not let you go out in the rain, not let you tire yourself like that. You and our baby mustn't leave me. Whatever it takes, I'll protect you both." Hoai slowly opened her eyes, meeting his with a weak but trusting gaze. She couldn't form words, but she forced a faint smile, a teardrop shimmering at the corner of her eye. In the hospital room, everything seemed to fall into silence. Only the steady beep, beep, of the fetal heart monitor echoed, each fragile beat carrying hope, anchoring the family's faith in this critical moment. Just after bringing Hoai home from the hospital, Hung's heart was still heavy with worry. He carefully helped her onto the bed, then hurried to boil water, adding slices of ginger to keep her belly warm. Every movement he made was slow and cautious, as if the smallest mistake might worsen her pain. He instructed Mother Ha on every detail, from watching over Hoai's sleep, to cooking thin porridge, to making sure she did not get out of bed on her own. In what seemed like a fragile moment of peace, the warm air inside the small house was suddenly torn apart by the urgent ringing of the phone. Hung quickly picked it up, and from the other end came the firm, commanding voice of his superior. Hung, the situation in the highlands is extremely serious. Days of heavy rain have caused flash floods. Hundreds of households are now isolated in raging waters. Your unit's mission is to assemble immediately. By tomorrow you must be on site to evacuate the people from danger. This is an emergency order, no delay is allowed. Hearing this, Hung froze, his hand tightening around the phone. A deep sorrow flickered in his eyes. He turned back. Hoai lay weakly on the bed, her pale face turned toward the ceiling, one hand resting on her belly as if shielding the fragile life within. Beside her, Mother Ha sat silently, eyes red and swollen, while little Tony hugged his teddy bear, his innocent gaze uncomprehending of the heavy silence. Hung drew a deep breath, then raised his head, his voice steady and resolute. Understood. I'll make arrangements to return to base tomorrow, ready for the mission. When he hung up, his hand trembled slightly, as though pierced by 1,000 needles. One side was Hoai, the woman he loved dearly, needing him by her side every single moment. The other side was his sacred duty to the people and his comrades, where hundreds of lives awaited rescue. In that instant, he understood clearly. Wearing the soldier's uniform meant being ready to sacrifice personal happiness to protect the lives of the community. He walked slowly to her bedside, sat down, and clasped her frail hand. His eyes reddened, his voice breaking with emotion. Hoai, I have to return to the unit. This mission is urgent, I cannot refuse. Please rest assured, your mother and everyone will be here with you. I promise, I'll finish as soon as I can and come back to you and our baby. Hoai's lips trembled, as though she wanted to say something, but her voice was too weak. Only her eyes spoke, shining in the dim golden light, filled with both trust and worry. Inside the little house, the silence was suffocating. Only the night wind slipping through the cracks and the beating hearts of those bracing themselves against fate's storm could be heard. Hung's figure, this soldier who carried sacred duty on his shoulders, was once again preparing to leave his home, stepping into another battle, the fight against the wrath of nature waiting ahead. The day Hoai was discharged from the hospital, everyone at home breathed a sigh of relief. The familiar village road seemed to glow under the gentle golden sunlight, the breeze carrying the faint scent of young rice, yet in their hearts, unease lingered. Though she was temporarily stable, Hoai's face was still pale, her body thinner after days of exhaustion in the hospital. Her steps were weak, each one needing Hung's support until she reached her bed. The small familiar room, once filled with laughter and chatter, now fell into an uncanny silence. On the table, a vase of fresh yellow chrysanthemums still bloomed, a lone spark of brightness in the heavy air. Outside the window, the wind slipped softly through the bamboo, creaking in rhythm with the distant crowing of roosters, sounds both peaceful and weighted. Tony, only 3 years old and not yet speaking clearly, seemed to sense the difference. He refused to leave his mother's side. Clutching at the hem of her blouse, he sometimes climbed onto the bed, pressing his little head against her belly as if to shield the baby inside. Whenever Hoai grew weary, Tony would place his tiny hand on her cheek, his wide, watery eyes full of confusion. The sight pierced Hoai's heart with both pain and boundless love. Forcing a smile, she whispered softly to comfort him. "Be good, my love. Mommy is fine. I'll always be here with you." But even as the words left her lips, her eyes blurred with tears. Her fragile smile couldn't hide her weakness, and a glistening drop slid down onto Tony's soft hair. Hung's heart was weighed down with worry. He knew that in only a few hours, he had to return to his unit, to duty. The thought of leaving Hoai, so frail and weak, to fend for herself tore at him. He paced back and forth, hands clenched so tight they trembled. Finally, Hung turned to Mother Ha, the foster mother who had quietly loved and cared for Hoai as her own child for so many years. His voice was earnest, almost pleading. "Please, Mom. I must return to the unit, but I can't leave Hoai here alone. I beg you to come stay with her, take care of her and the boy. This is the time she needs you most." At first, Mother Ha hesitated, afraid her presence might disrupt her daughter's private life. But as she looked into Hung's desperate eyes, heard his careful account of Hoai's fragile health, her mother's heart could no longer resist. She stood silently for a moment, tears brimming. Thinking of her foster daughter, pregnant, weakened, and now burdened by the fear of her husband's departure, she slowly nodded. Without another word, she packed a few clothes, some tonic medicine, and a handful of familiar cooking tools. With quiet urgency, she moved into Hoai's home. When the news of Hung's imminent departure for duty reached her, her heart clenched even tighter. Entering the room, she saw Hoai curled up, Tony sitting beside her unusually quiet, his small hands clutching his mother's hand. Unable to hold back, Mother Ha sat down, embracing her daughter tightly. Her voice trembled yet was full of resolve. "Don't you worry anymore. I'll stay here, take care of you and the boy. You don't have to endure this alone, just wait for Hung to come back. From now on, in this home, you are never alone." Hearing those words, Hoai's shoulders shook, and she broke down in sobs like a child. Tears streamed down her cheeks, soaking into her foster mother's blouse. They were not only tears of weakness, but also tears of relief, knowing she had a strong pillar to lean on amid the storm. In her mother's warm embrace, within the little house filled with love, Hoai felt the strength of family, the very strength that would help her endure and wait for Hung's safe return. Hung and his comrades waded into the freezing floodwaters. The rain still poured down in torrents, while howling winds ripped away tin roofs and uprooted trees, their roar echoing like a warning that the danger had not yet passed. The muddy current surged violently, carrying with it broken branches, soil, and even wooden beams from shattered homes upstream. Each step the soldiers took was heavy as lead, the slippery mud made them stumble again and again. At times, the water rose to their chests, icy cold to the bone, but not one of them stopped. They silently guided frail elders, whose trembling hands clung desperately to their shoulders. They carried infants in their arms, their cries of fear piercing through the stormy mountains. When families could not move their livestock in time, the soldiers tied ropes around buffalo and cows, pulling them across the raging waters so that villagers might salvage what little they owned. Amid the raging flood, Hung's eyes shone with unyielding determination. Each time he carried a child to safety, he thought of Tony, his own little boy at home, the same tender age, just as innocent and fragile. When he helped a pregnant woman across the torrent, his heart clenched even tighter, for the pale face of Hoai lingered vividly in his mind. Every raindrop, every splash against his face seemed to remind him, behind him was a family waiting anxiously for his return. Meanwhile, in the small house below the village, the rain fell endlessly. It hammered the old tiled roof, dripping steadily through cracks, its relentless rhythm echoing in the dim room. Hoai leaned back against her pillow, her frail body thin and weary, one hand resting on her belly, the other clutching a blanket tightly. Her gaze fixed on the blurred window, where the downpour veiled the familiar road leading home. She did not know where Hung was at that moment, or if he was safe, only that her heart tightened with every thought. Little Tony sat close by, his tiny hands gripping his mother's arm. His wide eyes followed her gaze, as if he too were waiting for a familiar figure to return. He didn't fully understand, only that his father was gone, his mother was sad, and so he refused to leave her side. He babbled softly, pressing his head into her lap, as if asking her to smile, even just a little. Mother Ha sat quietly beside them, her calloused hands wrapped around her foster daughters. She said little, but every so often she squeezed that hand firmly, as though to pass on warmth and strength. In that humble little house, her presence stood like a sturdy wall, shielding Hoai and Tony against the storm outside. No matter how hard the rain lashed down, inside there was still an anchor, still a love that quietly kept them warm. Out there, Hung pressed on through the raging flood. In here, Hoai waited, every minute, every second. The distance was only a few mountains and streams, yet in that moment, it felt like an endless divide. And then, the narrator's voice closed, leaving a lingering ache in the hearts of the listeners. Will Hung overcome the danger to return to Hoai and their children? Will the interrupted wedding be continued after the storm?
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện của mẹ đơn thân Lytieuca và kịch sát thủ, và hiện tại thì mình vẫn đang edit dở và chưa có hoàn thành. Mình vẫn đang cố gắng hoàn thành video sớm nhất trong thời gian có thể để có thể đăng tải lên YouTube để cho mọi người xem sớm nhất. Hy vọng rằng mọi người sẽ ủng hộ cho kênh mình nhiều hơn, và nếu như mà có thắc mắc hay là có góp ý gì thì mọi người có thể để lại cho mình ở phần bình luận, và hy vọng rằng vẫn có thể gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo. Và mong rằng mọi người hãy để lại những lời an ủi cũng như là chúc phúc đến cho Hoài Ca và Hùng, để họ có thể có thêm sức mạnh để tiếp tục gắn bó với nhau trên con đường tình yêu sắp tới. Và hy vọng rằng Hoài Ca và Hùng sẽ vượt qua khó khăn lần này và sẽ có một cái đám cưới thật là ý nghĩa và hạnh phúc cho sau này. Và hẹn gặp lại mọi người, mong sẽ gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo.